Wu Hao was ready to die on the battlefield, but unexpectedly caught a female star with the same stage name on the 18th line. After Wu Hao figured out the situation, he found that he had finally lived a peaceful life with money and leisure. She rubbed her hands and said, "After I finish participating in this variety show, I will live a retirement life." After participating in the variety show, the company thought that this little celebrity had a good reputation and then gave her a costume drama. "I'll retire after I finish filming." After filming, the agent felt that this person was a playable talent and took on another movie. "I'll retire after I finish filming." Wu Hao, who finished filming the movie, was pushed to the international stage with a trophy in her hand, and fans were frantically calling for her. Wu Hao lay on the lazy chair on the set and said, "Forget it, the retirement life in the entertainment industry is also good." Other celebrities. Are you calling it retirement? Male lead. Introduction: Why doesn't there be a place for me? Dedication without self-awareness. Max force value: straight woman, weak body, scheming, beautiful big white lotus. Keywords of the novel. Every day I want to retire in the entertainment industry without pop-ups. Every day I want to retire in the entertainment industry. Download the complete set of TXT, and every day I want to read the latest chapters on retirement in the entertainment industry. Chapter 1. Chaotang. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Chaotang. Your Majesty, think twice. Several old officials with white hair in the court trembled and knelt down to plead. But the person being pleaded for stood in front of the court without speaking. She was wearing silver armor, covered in mud and dried blood, with messy hair and an unclean face. She stood alone with a long sword in her hand, like a straight cold pine tree. Why should the 9 families of the martial arts be executed? The person's voice was hoarse, unable to even distinguish between men and women, appearing a bit harsh in the quiet hall. The old emperor sat on the dragon chair, squinting his eyes as if he wanted to take a closer look at the person with his muddy eyes. Behind Wu Hao knelt a row of Wu family members and generals, all of whom had their eyes covered and their mouths blocked, looking mentally drained. A few people had been tortured to the point of being immature, but upon hearing Wu Hao's voice, they kept kowtowing to the front, hoping that the emperor would spare her life. The old emperor smashed his mouth and said, "What do you think? Your martial arts family has committed the crime of bullying the emperor." Wu Hao's eyes turned red and he stared fiercely at the old emperor. "When will our Wu family bully you? What words will bully you?" The old emperor gave a glance and the guards beside him quickly approached and surrounded the person. "Just pretend to be a man and go to the battlefield. The national teacher said that if you provoke the heavens, they will bring disaster. You disaster star." The emperor pointed at the person excitedly and cursed loudly. Yes, the Protector General Wu Hao standing here in the court was actually a woman. As soon as this news came out, the court was quiet for a few seconds. Wu Hao, the granddaughter of the Wu family, was brought to the battlefield by her father since childhood. When he could walk, he was taken to the battlefield to observe, and when he reached the grade where he could ride and shoot, he was taken to the battlefield by his brother. All of this was because the martial arts family had a premonition that they would disappear in the long river of history. The Wu family has been loyal and virtuous for generations, and they are well aware that the identity of the Wu family's granddaughter cannot protect her and may even harm her. The old master of the Wu family came up with a solution, which was to teach her all the skills and let her carve out a world on her own. The Wu family woman also agreed to this method, and Wu Hao abandoned his female identity from outside. Although Wu Hao is a woman, she is a good talent for practicing martial arts. Coupled with her willingness to endure hardships and high intelligence, no one in the martial arts family needs to deliberately conceal her identity. Wu Hao was instilled with loyalty and martyrdom from a young age, but as he grew up, his style of conduct was not like that of the Wu family. At the age of 16, Wu Hao went out to cause trouble and was caught. She knelt in the temple, carrying family teachings. Her father asked her, "Where is wrong?" She straightened her waist and said, it was my carelessness that allowed the old general in the store to recognize my identity and inform you. The old man sat in the ancestral hall, drinking tea and jokingly cursing, "Little rabbit." The martial arts family intended to keep it out of the spotlight, but this young general, at the age of 18, lurked into the enemy camp with a team of people and wiped the neck of the enemy general. The fame gained from this battle is well known throughout the city, and the martial artists are unsure whether to be happy or anxious. The old master of the Wu family called her to his own courtyard on the night of her first victory in battle. He asked Wu Hao, "You have won battles and made contributions, but you should be cautious of arrogance and impatience, and understand who your loyalty should be entrusted to." Wu Hao knelt down to the old man and said, "My grandson, remember that the younger generation of the Wu family will always be loyal to the country. And someone who can govern the country well." The old man couldn't tell the thoughts of an 18-year-old young man. The old man called Wu Hao dad to drink at night and said, "Little girl is stronger than you." Her father smiled happily and bumped into the old man. The old man looked up and drank everything before saying, "It's better than a martial family." Next, this young general won every battle, and the emperor promoted her to the position of the protector general. But in the end, it was impossible to contain fire in paper, and I don't know when the emperor became suspicious. The fact that Wu Hao was a woman was known to the emperor. A courtier walked out and said, "This month, locusts, floods, and even droughts have occurred in various places one after another. The disaster stars are not eliminated. Our country is rare and peaceful. Please execute the disaster stars immediately, Emperor. Please execute the disaster star immediately, Emperor." The voice seemed to lift the roof and the hall became lively. How could the Protector General be a disaster star? Absurdity. Absurdity. This is simply nonsense. The successive disasters in various regions have emerged after Wu Hao went to the battlefield. She is not a disaster star, what is it? Both sides argued with their own opinions. The emperor gestured to the eunuch behind him, and the eunuch let out a sharp voice, "Silent." The courtiers quieted down, and the main hall returned to its previous dead silence. The old emperor stood up trembling, and the eunuch beside him quickly reached out to help him. He looked at Wu Hao, who was just mentioned as the Protector General, with a seductive expression, and cleared his throat, saying, "The national teacher said that there is no way out." Several ministers who had pleaded for mercy on behalf of Wu Hao quickly knelt down and said, "Please spare the life of the great general of the country, Your Majesty." The emperor signaled to the eunuch, and the eunuch took a step forward. The national teacher said that only when Wu Hao enters the harem and becomes His Majesty's consort, and Wu Hao receives His Majesty's dragon energy protection, heaven will forgive her. Wu Hao stood in the middle of the court and laughed, turning from a light smile to a head-up laugh, looking almost crazy. The warrior family behind them were full of tears, wondering if everything was wrong from the beginning. The ministers understand, this is because the old emperor has become lecherous again, just find a reason to insult Wu Hao. Everyone sighed inwardly, it can only be blamed on the poor fortune of the martial family. The loyal and martyrs of the entire family cannot escape the emperor's calculations. Wu Hao slowly took off his armor and said, "My martial family has been loyal for generations, full of passion and loyalty. Auntie is afraid that the martial family will have no future, so she has always called me heir. What's wrong with that? Where did she bully you?" The emperor stared intently at Wu Hao, and the ministers couldn't bear to look. They all lowered their heads and closed their eyes. Our Wu family, in order to maintain peace and stability in our country, has killed and injured male soldiers. I have the courage and strategy to fight on the battlefield. What kind of deceit is this? Wu Hao said as he casually threw the waist badge symbolizing the protection of the great general at his feet. The ministers couldn't help feeling sour as they looked at Wu Hao and his family behind him. The old emperor was so angry that he stood up and pointed at her, saying, You. 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 It's so despicable. Wu Hao threw down the imperial bestowed sword, stepped on the waist tag of the Protector General under his feet, and even twisted twice. What's wrong with me? Isn't this what you want to see? The old emperor was so angry that he sat back on the dragon chair. Several senior officials have already shed tears. Wu Hao was wearing a thin inner garment. My aunt said, "We have shed blood for this land for generations, and we are not afraid of sacrifice. Every time I go to the battlefield, I leave a testament letter." Is this considered bullying the king? The emperor was scolded to the point of being speechless, struggling to say, "You are deceiving the emperor by pretending to be a man." Wu Hao tilted his head and smiled, looking somewhat innocent like a young girl. But where did our Wu family say that I am a man? My son, I am my parents' daughter. Is there anything wrong? The old emperor widened his eyes and said, "You're just talking nonsense." The guards are not sure if they are staring at Wu Hao, being careful of her every move, or if they are looking down and not looking. This is a woman that the emperor has set his sights on, and even one more glance would make her lose her head. Wu Hao took advantage of everyone's unpreparedness and pulled out the dagger from his waist, stabbing it into the heart of the old emperor. The ministers and guards did not react, and the emperor had already been stabbed by Wu Hao. The piercing voice of the eunuch spread, "Escort! Escort!" Every sword of the guards pierced Wu Hao's body, and it was unclear whether her strength was too great or whether no one truly wanted to save the emperor. Several people approached without pulling back Wu Hao. The court was in chaos, and Wu Hao wished he could poke the handle of the knife into the old emperor's stomach. She fiercely turned the dagger around. She grinned and blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. "Dog emperor, go to hell." The guard pulled apart Wu Hao, who was seriously injured and had no strength, and fell to the ground. Wu Hao felt pain all over her body, but it didn't seem to hurt. She murmured softly, "Unfortunately, I didn't die in battle." The court was in chaos. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Xia Yan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Xia Yan. Wu Hao slowly opened her eyes and regained consciousness. Her eyes were pitch black, and she touched her abdomen and back. It shouldn't be, even if the dog emperor didn't die, he would cut me 1,000 times. How could I still live well? She touched her limbs again. No. How could one's own hands be so tender? What about cocoons? Why are your legs so thin? What about scars? She remembered the strange stories the soldiers talked about around the campfire at night and thought to herself, "Are you being haunted by starving ghosts? No wonder you're as thin as skin and bones." But she touched the skin on her face again, smooth and delicate, not as yellow and thin as the hungry ghost said. She looked around and found an empty aisle next to her, with stone steps and cold handrails in front of her. A strange and peculiar memory appeared in her mind, and she came to a door with the help of her body's memory. She looked at the uniquely designed door handle and reached out to grab it naturally. Suddenly, with a drip sound, she was startled and the door slowly opened. She pondered for a while, as if in her memory this was called fingerprint unlocking. She walked in, then turned around and was startled by the person next to her, who was doing the same action as her. It was then that she understood it was a mirror, a very clear and smooth mirror, something that did not belong to her era. The person in the mirror looks bright and grand, but it is necessary to use makeup to suppress this beauty. Wu Hao waited in front of the mirror for a while to calm down before feeling a particularly painful pain in the back of her head. She touched it with her hand and found a significant wound that had already formed a blood scab. Wu Hao looked at his expression in the mirror and felt a bit confused. What's going on? I'm just borrowing a corpse to revive my soul. She took a moment to digest the information, sorted out the messy memories in her head, and then observed the person in the mirror. Wu Hao began to touch his body and mutter to himself, "This person doesn't seem to be in good mental condition. His complexion is pale and his body is cold and weak, and he also has some spleen deficiency." His body posture is not right, and I can feel hunger in my stomach. I haven't eaten well for several days, and I can also feel a noticeable lack of confidence when speaking. After finishing speaking, he put his hand on his wrist and said, moreover, his pulse is weak and there is a situation of qi and blood deficiency stagnation. She touched her arms and thighs and exclaimed, this is clearly a waste. Wu Hao often lives in turmoil on the battlefield, and seeing someone who is not responsible for his own health makes him both angry and regretful. She began to slowly walk around the room, seeing some strange things, grateful that she had the memory of the original owner and was not confused. Xia Yan, 24 years old, left her parents at the age of 18, with no family or property. Xia Yan worked hard to support herself. The original owner's parents seem to have hardly ever returned home, almost all of them were raised freely, but the original owner is still very sensible, studying hard and not letting their parents worry. Xia Yan became popular due to a campus photo and embarked on the path of the entertainment industry. Coincidentally, Xia Yan's debut stage name is Wu Hao. Wu Hao also felt that it was too coincidental, and his mind recalled why he chose this stage name, but the memories of this part seemed to disappear out of thin air. But this road is destined not to be smooth. In her memory, Xia Yan did many things she didn't want to do in order to make money, and also suffered a lot of grievances. Squeezed by superiors, taken advantage of at parties, and calculated by peers. It is not easy for a girl without any background to come here step by step in order to win the favor of her superiors and create the company's predetermined persona, but to be criticized and spread rumors by those she does not like. She also has to be calculated behind the scenes. However, Xia Yan still maintains simplicity and enthusiasm. There is a huge contrast between the company's image and her personality. After the company discovered it, it was already too late, so she had to be pushed out and criticized by many for being a white lotus flower. She touched the wound on her head again and carefully recalled that someone had pushed her in the darkness and said, "You're not worth staying in the entertainment industry." This is not an accident, she thought to herself that she must uncover the culprit. Wu Hao recalled Xia Yan's experience and felt uncomfortable. He had been training, and fighting since childhood. Although he would confront some of his old friends in the court, there was no such delicate thoughts. Every time she returned from the expedition, she would see the coquettish women on the roadside, which made people couldn't help but pity them, but she didn't know that coquettish women also have such sad and aggrieved stories. After calming down, she found herself hungry and turned to the place in her memory where she could find food. She was eating leftover food taken out of the refrigerator, and the cold rice choked her throat, but it was much better than dry food. Wu Hao touched his exquisitely skinned face and thought to himself, what is this? Is it a lifetime of rebirth? What price should I pay if heaven favors me and allows me to live another life? Wu Hao walked to the balcony and looked out at the pitch black and dim lights, feeling a bit confused. She sorted out the memories in her head. This body doesn't need to fight enemies on the battlefield, doesn't need to live outdoors, and is much better than her life, but there aren't many happy memories. Before she could think for a while, her stomach felt a burning sensation, and she recalled that there seemed to be many minor ailments in this body. Although she was determined, her body was really weak, and she found medicine based on her memory. After taking the pills, her stomach felt much better in no time, and she was surprised that these 2 pills, which were not as big as her fingernail, could cure her illness. At this moment, the phone rang and the screen read, "Sister Ma." She used to press the green button and her face appeared on the phone screen, trying to stay calm and stare at the woman in the picture. The woman was wearing glasses with heavy black circles under her eyes, and her sharp gaze stared at her as she spoke. "What are you waiting for? Tell me what you really want to do. How should you handle this matter? The company is very disappointed with this matter. What are your plans?" Wu didn't know what to say, and the weak replied, "Why not join the army?" The person across from me was angry and laughed, "What? You want to get into a big fight with fans and rumormongers? You forgot about the penalty. Be careful not to pay you. Upon hearing the penalty and compensation, Wu Hao knew she didn't have that much money. She collapsed and sighed, "No, Ma Jie, I'm joking." Ma Jie's gaze turned and she watched as her fingers kept jumping on the table on the other side. Although this is not your problem, you are also too unlucky. How did you bump into Yi Mingsha? His fans are notoriously difficult to deal with. Wu Hao followed Ma Jie's topic and slowly recalled the incident, saying, "It seems like I watched a teaching video about forensic medicine and then ran out, only to bump into Yi Mingsha and vomit on him." Sister Ma looked at Wu Hao strangely and said, "You've explained it to me many times, I believe you. Didn't you say you won't mention it again?" Wu Hao immediately shut up. She knows how to say more and make more mistakes. Many treasures say they call the police. Actually, I called the police. In the following chapters, it's just not specifically mentioned. In the chapter on moving apartments, it should be because Sister Ma reported to the police and didn't catch anyone, that's why she moved the apartment. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Sister Ma. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Sister Ma stared at Wu Hao and kept looking at him. "What's wrong with you?" Wu Hao thought of a way to deal with it, but suddenly she felt the pain in the back of her head and had a plan in her mind. She wiped the back of her head and showed her blood-stained palm in front of Ma Jie. Before she could even speak, Ma Jie exclaimed, "Oh my God, what's wrong with you? What did you do? Why did you bleed so much?" Wu Hao was startled by the sound and lowered his voice. "It's not that I did something. I just couldn't wait for the elevator downstairs and walked up the stairs. I was pushed at the stairwell and my mind is a bit unclear now." She was extracting memories about Ma Jie in her mind. Ma Jie's name was Ma Fong, and it was said that she was a strong woman in the company, but she was not highly valued by the company. The most obvious thing is that all the artists trained by Ma Fong have been transferred to the hands of other agents. Xia Yan was handed over to Ma Jie after she had an accident, and Ma Jie was also in a downturn in her career at that time. Both of them had no complaints. At that time, Ma Jie was wearing exquisite makeup and a pair of small sheepskin high heels, dressed in a light gray suit. She just glanced at Xia Yan lightly and led him away. She told Xia Yan that she was very optimistic about him, but there were no useless people who didn't make progress here. Either they had talent and worked hard, or they didn't have talent but put in double the effort. Xia Yan had an accident with her original body not long after she was in her hands, so Wu Hao didn't know much about this seemingly powerful woman. Sister Ma is no longer on the screen of her phone, and a clanging voice can be heard over there. "Don't be fooled, put on your clothes and wait for me at home." After hanging up the phone, she accidentally unlocked her phone with her fingerprint, and the phone page stopped in hot searches for Wu Hao becomes a demon. Wu Hao's character set crashed, and Yi Mingsha is so miserable. She curiously picked up something called a phone and began searching for information about Xia Yan based on her memory. Typing in the words, Wu Hao, resulted in a flood of malicious comments. Can Wu Hao crawl away? It's so annoying. Wu Hao really blinded her face in vain. Who gave her the courage to stick to our brother? Wu Hao fell silent as she watched these comments, trying to select and digest useful information. Wu Hao worked hard to understand every word inside, and gradually understood it almost. After reading these negative comments, Wu Hao breathed a sigh of relief and put down his phone, saying, "It's really tiring. These people are also idle, and even the dog emperor is not as lenient as they are." She pondered on the ins and outs of this matter. The agent arranged a variety show for her, which was about forensic science. Due to the nature of her profession, many artists in the company have been recommended, and Xia Yan can only grit her teeth. As a result, she was selected to watch an introductory anatomy teaching video without her knowledge, but halfway through, she couldn't accept Xia Yan and ran out of the classroom, throwing up a mess. Coincidentally, as soon as he ran out, he bumped into a popular young man and was about to push him away, but he didn't have time to vomit all over his body. With this push, something happened. If everything is okay normally, we can still quell this controversy by explaining the methods of buying hot search and water army, but the timing of this incident is really bad. Not long ago, a person claiming to be a staff member posted a blurry video online, but it was clear that the female protagonist was Xia Yan. In the video, Xia Yan walked to the corner and spat out the food he had eaten while no one was paying attention, and this happened several times in a row. This video went viral, and the good reputation earned by Xia Yan's previous persona was ruined. Xia Yan was labeled by the company as a foodie, fat eater, big stomach king, and cute and spoiled due to her slim figure, which did not match her personal image. In fact, she was only relatively frugal before, and coupled with her poor rest after becoming famous, the company strictly demanded her diet, which has caused Xia Yan to have a slight eating disorder. The wave of online public opinion immediately overwhelmed Xia Yan, but she did not feel aggrieved but rather felt relieved. Xia Yan was ready to apologize to everyone and explain clearly. The company refused this approach for fear of attracting criticism, but later promised not to post any messy personas for Xia Yan. But before Xia Yan could fight for another chance to explain, he was pushed down the stairs and died. After accepting these memories, Wu Hao felt a bit sad and aggrieved, as well as a bit unwilling. She quickly understood that these were some emotions and reflections of the body itself, and Wu Hao calmed her emotions. Wu Hao was wondering why the visuals on the program did not match his memory at all. She saw that there were also a small number of her fans defending her in the comments. At first glance, it appears to be malicious editing by the production team. The program team can really do anything to attract attention. With the help of the powerful internet, it took her some time to understand what is called editing and what is called malicious editing. In this information age, people focus on being fast, diverse, and interesting. They only look at the information they want to see, and not many people care about logical order or even enjoy being nonsensical. Then, in order to cater to the taste of the public, editing is like cutting the ends and adding embellishments to the memorials, all of which are messy things. Then she went to watch the program again and realized that the story was told in pieces. This kind of bad program, combined with an artist who made a mistake, actually went viral and earned a wave of traffic. Wu Hao felt unsatisfied and took out 2 loaves of bread, searching for information about forensic medicine while eating. She thought it was fortunate that she didn't have the eating disorder she mentioned, otherwise her body would really collapse. The more she searched, the more excited she became. Suddenly, she patted the table and stood up. This is simply amazing. If our country had these talented individuals and profound knowledge, why worry about the future of criminal law? Wu Hao was excitedly browsing through new knowledge, a world she had never seen before. This world can shine without fire, with skilled doctors when sick and cars that can run on their own. She strives to absorb every bit of knowledge from this world. She also understood why Xia Yan's body suffered losses and often didn't eat. She felt a bit helpless, knowing that all aspects were so outstanding. Why did she have these abnormal cultures and behaviors instead? Sister Ma hurriedly opened the door with her spare key and saw that her celebrity still had unfinished blood stains on her head. She was holding bread in her hand, chewing it in her mouth, and her cheeks were bulging with abnormal excitement. She strode forward and grabbed her collar as she walked out. When did it happen? Now you know you're eating. If something happens, don't you tell me. Are you afraid you'll live too long? Wu Hao tightly gripped the bread with one hand and begged with the other, protecting his ear, that. Ma Jie, you wait for me to finish this bite. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Public Opinion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Public Opinion. Sister Ma put on her mask and dragged her to the elevator. First, go to the hospital. By the way, think about where the elevator stops when you want to take it. Wu Hao thought for a moment and said, it should be the 27th floor, and that glowing number has been stopping at 27. Her floor is at 25 after Ma Jie, and she waited for the elevator to enter. Ma Jie first pressed the button on the 27th floor. When she reached the 27th floor, Ma Jie went out and touched the buttons outside, which had a slightly astringent feel. The tape had not left any obvious marks after being used for a while. Ma Jie is certain that someone deliberately created the illusion that the elevator cannot be used, just to hide in the hallway and sneak attack Xia Yan. Wu Hao dared not make a sound in the elevator. One was afraid of saying too much and making too many mistakes, the other was that Ma Jie was indeed fierce, and the weightlessness on the stairs made her almost unable to keep up with people. Sister Ma helped Wu Hao, who looked disheveled, into the car. She breathed a sigh of relief and almost revealed her true colors. Ma Jie stepped on the accelerator and drove out. Although she may have sat 1,000 times, Wu Hao held on to her seat belt tightly as it was her first time riding in a car. Sister Ma's car is very good and has a strong sense of acceleration. She starts very fast, but only Wu Hao is injured. She felt that her soul, which had just crossed from another world, was about to be thrown out of this body. When she arrived at the hospital, Sister Ma looked at Wu Hao, whose face was not quite right, and asked, "What's wrong? Are you feeling nauseous? Is it because of motion sickness or excessive blood loss? Aren't you not motion sickness?" Wu Hao waved her hand without answering, afraid that her soul would run out of her mouth as soon as she spoke. After reporting to the police and arriving at the hospital, the two of them underwent various examinations and recorded confessions, and worked tirelessly until the latter half of the night. The doctor held various checklists and said, "The wound is still a bit big, and this kind of injury, as you mentioned, can also affect memory. Go back and rest more, and don't touch the wound with water. Why did you fall so badly? Delaying it for a while will have even more serious consequences." Wu Hao thought to himself, "No, my previous soul flew away." Ma Jie looked at Wu Hao, who was stunned, and asked the doctor quietly, "Will intelligence be affected?" Sister Ma quickly asked, "Good martial arts. How can a visually impaired person express to others that they want to drink water?" Wu Hao hesitated for a moment and weakly replied, "Speak with your mouth." Sister Ma, rest assured. The last one who couldn't answer this question was their little assistant. "It's okay, just be smarter than the little assistant." The doctor shook his head and smiled as he looked at Wu Hao, "I don't think so. Isn't that quite normal?" Ma Jie finally felt at ease, and the doctor warned, "This is also related to the weak body. Let this child eat more, and if he doesn't keep up with the nutrition, he will lose skin and bones." Ma Jie pulled Wu Hao, who had a headache and nausea, out of the hospital gate, and the two of them returned home. Wu Hao felt that not going to the hospital was just a headache. After going to the hospital, her soul was in pain, and she collapsed on the sofa. Ma Jie looked at her relaxed appearance and felt that it was not quite like Xia Yan, who was sensitive and patient before. Sister Ma is completely mistaken for the aftermath of this injury. Ma Jie settled down before she was ready to go home. Wu Hao was grateful and said, "Ma Jie is so late, why don't you make do with me?" Ma gave her a glare and said, "Don't be so brainless. I still have a baby at home." Wu Hao suddenly remembered that Sister Ma had only given birth for less than a year, and quickly avoided the topic. "Oh, I'm sorry, Sister Ma, I've taken up your time." Ma Jie packed up her things and stood at the door admonishing her. I asked, "You still need to follow that variety show, you can't push it off. Don't go watch those hot searches recently, try to be low-key, and don't make things complicated." Wu didn't know what to say and could only pretend to agree. Sister Ma remained silent for a moment. "Don't think too much. You should rest well in the next few days, and I will try to negotiate for you again to see if there is any opportunity." Sister Ma looked at Wu Hao without saying a word and thought she was wronged. She touched Wu Hao's head and suddenly received a message. After reading it, she said to Wu Hao, "If you have anything you want to clarify, you can post it on Weibo. The company agrees to do so." Wu Hao was not used to being touched by people's heads, so he hesitated for a while before picking up his phone and starting typing. The typing speed was not fast. In Ma's eyes, it's fake not to feel sorry for seeing her own artist so injured and so slow. Wu Hao pondered for a long time and wrote a concise and powerful statement. 1. Enter the anatomy classroom in advance without prior notice from the production team. 2. Fear of vomiting on others, act quickly and run quickly, not intentionally at Mingxia. 3. Do things with a cause and no consequences, and do not take the drama seriously. 4. Single, independent, do not disturb. She showed the edited content to Sister Ma once, and she said it was okay. Then, she clicked on publish and forwarded it using her own Weibo account. As soon as the information on the phone was released, it started to skyrocket. Sister Ma asked Wu Hao not to pay attention, as Wu Hao was already indifferent. Wu Hao looked at those unpleasant and insincere words, and Ma Jia also saw them. She taught Wu Hao to pick out a few obvious editing problems from the program clips and posted a sentence, right or wrong has its own judgment. Half of the people who scolded her in an instant were gone, and upon closer inspection, they all went to the official section of the program team to criticize her. The company feels that the trend is good and has issued a statement, which roughly means that it will fully protect the rights of its own artists from harm. Fans of the company's artists expressed their heartfelt gratitude. Ma Jia finally put on her coat and patted Wu Hao's head with peace of mind. That's pretty good. Don't jump around anymore. If you're really stupid, your reputation as a vase will have to be established. Take a good rest for 2 days, and I'll say hello to the company. Silently seeing off Sister Ma, she opened Weibo again and found that her male celebrity, Ai Te, had spoken on her behalf, with many indecent comments missing from the statement. Wu Hao reposted the male celebrity's Weibo account and generously left a message saying, "Thank you, brother," before returning to his room to sleep. Mingxia looked puzzled as she replied to him, "Thank you, brother." The agent leaned over and glanced at him, "Oh, thank you very much, brother. Is Wu Hao going to take on a costume show recently?" Mingxia turned off the screen and threw the phone aside, "Don't worry, I've helped everything I can, and I can't do anything else." The agent handed him a glass of water and said, "Just be kind, be careful not to fall for you." Mingxia smiled and said, "Not everyone can rely on me, a sunny and energetic young man." The agent rolled his eyes and asked, "To be honest, why did you help her? You've been vomited all over." Mingxia thought for a moment and said, "Maybe this girl is also quite pitiful. She covered her mouth and came out with red eyes." The agent kicked him and said, "Don't have any other thoughts. Wu Hao is currently at the forefront of the storm. Don't follow him as a demon." Mingxia flicked her bangs and said with a foul fart on her face, "Hey, I'm afraid I'm so charming that the wind and waves are coming towards me. TSK. The agent couldn't hear such vulgar language and took the key out of the door. "The food is in the refrigerator, I'm going out now. Take a good look at the materials prepared for you, and then the variety show says it won't be used." Mingxia agreed perfunctorily and went to sleep. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Assistant. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Assistant. The next day when I woke up, the weather was foggy and the injury to the back of my head was severe. Wu Hao opened his phone and received several messages. Firstly, the production team sent a message informing Wu Hao that the recording of the program would be delayed by a week. Secondly, they apologized for the harm caused to Wu Hao. Secondly, Ma Jia's message reminds her not to run around. She will ask her assistant to deliver food to her. The third one is a hairdresser named Xiaozhu. "Boss, please contact me when you wake up." Come right away. She thought about the little assistant again, who was also under Ma's command. She was quick-witted, sweet-tongued, and talkative, making her a very cute and delicate woman. She still decided not to contact the assistant for now, as she wanted to sort out the messy memories in her mind. She sat at the table with paper and a pen. The paper and pen here were still a bit uncomfortable, but for the sake of her future life, she decided to give it a try. She began to write and draw on paper, but the hard nib made it a bit awkward for her to write. The paper was chaotic, with both traditional and simplified characters. She sighed and took out a piece of paper to write about. She always wanted to know what to do and what not to do in order to live long. Until she wrote a page full of original memories of simplified characters and her own memories of traditional characters, she finally put down her pen with satisfaction and successfully completed the first step. Glancing at the watch, it was already noon. She sat up and moved her body, and the doorbell rang. She walked over and looked through the cat's eyes at a petite doll-faced girl who looked cute and adorable. This was the little assistant who sent messages. She opened the door, and the assistant immediately bounced in with something. "Sister, you're so anxious about me. Ma told me everything about yesterday, are you okay? Are you seriously injured? Ma said you're going to be silly, but your face is still there and you can still be a vase." Wu Hao instantaneously felt that this was not a petite woman, but a cute and petite version of Ma Jie, with a work style similar to that of Ma Jie. As she spoke, the little assistant placed the things on the table and then pressed Wu Hao onto the chair to sit down. She carefully opened the wound on the back of her head, which exposed and made her gasp for breath. "Hiss, who is so immoral? I've really suffered from blood mold for 8 lifetimes. Sister, do your wounds still hurt? Do you need to change your dressing today?" Wu Hao was arranged clearly, and she nodded. The doctor said they need to go to the hospital to change their dressing in the next few days. The assistant took out the lunch box and neatly placed it on the table. "I understand, you eat first, and I'll drive you there later." Wu Hao's eyes lit up when he saw the food, and as soon as he entered the door, he smelled the aroma of the food. She sat at the table and started eating seriously. The assistant is still nagging, "Sister, you should eat more. You see, you're just because your health is too poor, you need to eat more." Before she could finish speaking, she turned her head and saw that Wu Hao had already eaten half a bowl of rice and was still chewing non-stop in his mouth. Upon hearing these words, Wu Hao nodded unconsciously and said, "Yes, I also think we should eat more. It's like being skinny." The little assistant stared intently at Wu Hao as he had eaten almost all of this table. She watched as Wu Hao collapsed peacefully on the stool. She asked, "Sister, are you full?" Wu Hao nodded and touched his stomach. "You're done eating." "Sister, do you feel anything now?" she asked again. Wu Hao nodded and said, "I feel really comfortable in my stomach. Don't feel nauseous." She still felt uneasy. After all, in her impression, my sister hasn't had a normal meal for a long time. Wu Hao thinks it's okay, but she still doesn't feel too confident about this body. "How about you give me that stomach strengthening and digestive tablet?" The assistant confirmed that there was no problem with his martial arts skills, so he happily went to get the medicine and muttered, "Thank you, Koi. I'll make a wish when I go back." After packing up, the assistant took Wu Hao to the hospital. Wu Hao thought for a moment, and the assistant seemed to have the surname Wei. She asked, "Wei?" The assistant just glanced at her with extra light while driving. "Hey, sister, what's wrong with you?" Wu Hao Xiang turned into a curious baby and asked Xiao Wei a bunch of questions. Before Xiao Wei arrived, Ma Jie had already called her and said that Xia Yan had some confused memories. Xiao Wei did not doubt her, but instead felt a little happy, feeling that Xia Yan was making progress in a positive direction. When Wu Hao finished changing his medication at the hospital, Xiao Wei took Wu Hao for a walk. After a while, Sister Ma called Wu Hao and said, "Have you finished changing the medicine?" Wu Hao opened the hands-free guard and answered first, after changing to Sister Ma, "Take my sister out for some fresh air." Ma Jie finally confided in Wu Hao with peace of mind, "We will continue filming in a few days. You should be familiar with it and don't vomit again." Wu Hao nodded and said, "I'll go back and take a closer look. This shouldn't happen again." It's best if you think that way, Ma said, feeling relieved. Although Wu Hao has killed countless enemies on the battlefield and has seen a mortuary dissect a corpse, this systematic learning of how to dissect a corpse is unprecedented, and it helps solve cases and criminal law. She even wants to know more about it. The crying of the child on Sister Ma's side rang out, and the two of them hung up the phone. Xiao Wei also understood the previous situation and said, "Sister, why don't you watch relevant TV dramas or documentaries first to prepare yourself mentally?" Wu Hao thought for a while and nodded, thinking it was okay. She hasn't watched any TV dramas or documentaries yet. Xiao Wei took Wu Hao for a spin and returned home to find a classic TV drama called The Imprisonment Officer. Xiao Wei acted like a magician and took out 2 bags of potato chips and 2 buckets of popcorn. Wu Hao looked at Xiao Wei in surprise and said, "Where did you come from?" "I won't tell you." Xiao Wei playfully blinked his eyes. The two of them were ready to start pursuing the drama, and they were not too afraid of the theme, even enjoying it. Xiao Wei watched it once as a review, and Wu Hao became more and more excited as he watched it. These knowledge are something she couldn't learn in her previous life, and each one can reduce the occurrence of wrongful convictions. In the afternoon, both Xiao Wei and Wu Hao decided to order takeout, and Wu Hao silently noted down Xiao Wei's actions. In the evening, Sister Ma called again and told Wu Hao that she wanted to move out of this apartment. After such a thing happened, Sister Ma still felt uneasy about her safety. Wu Hao did not object or even think it was good, as a new environment would be beneficial for her current situation. Sister Ma said that she has already contacted the apartment and only needs the two of them to move over with their belongings. The next day, Xiao Wei and Wu Hao packed their things and put them in the trunk to move to their new home. According to Ma Jia, the security here is more responsible. It was not necessary to move, but Ma Jia also went to the community property management after the incident, and the security of the property was somewhat unsatisfactory. There is not much reliable evidence in the surveillance because it is dark and the person's facial features cannot be clearly seen, and the person intentionally avoided the camera. But Ma Jia still had an extra mind and copied all the relevant videos. After all, there was no risk. Although Ma Jia reported to the police, there was no follow-up, so she had to find a relatively safe community again. Xia Yan doesn't have much personal belongings, so the two of them moved relatively easily. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Moving. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Moving. The next day, Sister Ma and Xiao Wei came with daily necessities, fresh vegetables, and meat. Sister Ma placed the plastic bag on the table and said, "I took a look and there is a big supermarket not far from here. It's very convenient to come and go, and you can cook frequently in the future." Wu Hao is a bit guilty. In her memory, Zhongshan does know how to cook, and she does it very well, but she doesn't know how to do it. She can only have a barbecue or something at most. Xiao Wei looked at Wu Hao, who remained silent and puzzled. "What's wrong with you, sister? Didn't you love cooking before? Aren't you showing off today?" Wu Hao had no choice but to cover the back of his head and let out a loud cry. The two of them waited for Wu Hao to enter the inner room before Xiao Wei dared to ask Ma Jia, "Ma Jia, is the stimulation I've been experiencing too much this time? Why can't I even show interest in my favorite hobby? I'm not really foolish, am I?" Sister Ma skillfully washed vegetables and cooked. "Even if you're stupid, you have to follow me. Come and get some help." Wu Hao felt a bit embarrassed when he came out and looked at the busy backs of the two, so he washed his hands and joined them. Wu Hao seems to be a bit slow, he always pauses for a while before starting to do something slowly. Ma Jia and Xiao Wei stood next to each other, watching. Xiao Wei exclaimed, "A beauty is a beauty. Even though she acts like a mentally disabled person, looking at her face, my dog eyes have a built-in atmosphere filter. Even when my sister cooks, I can take an extra bite." Ma Jia slapped Xiao Wei and said, "I hope you can order an artist." Wu Hao slowly turned around, still holding an unfinished peeler in his hand. I can hear you talking, he said with a sinister tone. Xiao Wei made a gesture of silence, and Ma nodded jokingly, it's okay. You're not really stupid and you know how to talk back, but you're a bit slow. You can create a gimmick for a dull beauty then. Wu Hao immediately weakened and said, please, sister, let's not do this about character design, okay? Xiao Wei nodded in agreement and said, I'm at a loss. 4 dishes and 1 soup were quickly served in the hands of Ma Jia and Xiao Wei, but Wu Hao was despised and split by the two of them halfway through. It's okay, I can learn more about cooking, and I can cultivate my interests and hobbies. Xiao Wei patted her shoulder with a heart-wrenching expression. Wu Hao thinks that the assistant's imagination is a bit rich. The 3 of them started moving, and Sister Ma watched as Wu Hao's appetite surged and silently said, why don't you stop cooking in the future? Xiao Wei and Wu Hao were both puzzled, and Ma Jia said, you eat more without cooking. Wu Hao was willing to nod along with Ma Jia's words and promised not to cook frequently in the future. After finishing their meal, the 3 of them finished packing up and left separately. Wu Hao then turned on the TV and started watching the drama. Wu Hao stood on the side doing simple exercises while watching TV, jumping higher at exciting places. After a few days like this, I will soon be participating in a variety show recording. The day before recording, all artists were arranged to stay in a hotel. Wu Hao practiced boxing and horse stepping in the assigned hotel room. Sister Ma called, pay more attention tomorrow, and don't be too stressed. Wu Hao wiped his sweat and said, don't worry, there's no problem. Ma paused for a moment when she heard the gasping sound on the phone. Are you exercising? I feel like you've changed a bit lately. Is it really because of an injury? Wu Hao sighed and said slowly, really, Sister Ma. Ma comforted her a few more words before hanging up the phone. Wu Hao walked to the bathroom and propped her hands on the wash basin. She stared at her face in the mirror, her bright and charming face without any unnecessary expressions. She touched the mirror, and the water vapor on it outlined a rough face. She looked in the mirror and said, do I really want to be you? She washed her face and looked in the mirror again. Her face was not like what she remembered, with more sharpness and confidence. She smiled and said, it seems I can't do it. She casually wiped the water vapor off 2 mirrors and left. The next day, it was cloudy and rainy, and Wu Hao suddenly heard the door ring. Wu Hao quickly jumped up from the bed, with no drowsiness in his eyes. He looked around the environment. Wu Hao washed her face and stood behind the door, looking at the time 6:00. She walked lightly to the door, but her cat's eye was blocked. She pressed her ear against the door, and there was a lot of noise outside. Wu Hao thought about it for a moment, and it seems that they are all members of the program team. Wu Hao casually grabbed a handful of hair and picked up a silver chopsticks to plate. She opened the door, and the person immediately rushed up, wishing to slap the big black box in her face. She calmly pulled the distance between the two. A man walked slowly into the room with a smile on his face, but it made Wu Hao feel uneasy and kind-hearted. Wu Hao knows that this is the director of this variety show. Wu Hao nodded lightly and said, hello director. The man smiled even brighter and said, oh, I'm sorry, Miss Xia. I just came to your house suddenly. This is punishment for not completing the task last time. After speaking, he pointed to the camera and said, the main reason is that Miss Xia, you are well known and many people choose to live stream in a surprise manner. Don't be angry, what's wrong? I apologize for everyone here. Wu is so happy. I've heard this many times before I became a general, but now I've heard it again in another place, and I even miss those wolf-hearted thieves. Wu Hao smiled and patted the director's shoulder, saying, hi, look at what you're saying. I'm glad you're willing to come. There's nothing that doesn't make me angry. This action made Wu Hao appear very bold. The director was a bit confused by Wu Hao's shot and thought to himself, this female celebrity, why are you so tiger now? Before a few people could react, Wu Hao pulled them into the room and greeted them, oh, it's only 6 o'clock. Have you all eaten yet? Everyone shook their heads together, and the director was a bit confused. Wu Hao looked at the director's disdainful expression and thought to himself, is that all that fussy? The director only realized after entering the door and sitting on the sofa that all the control had been taken away. He gritted his teeth and looked at the camera with a smile. Our punishment today is to live stream, so do you want to say hello to the big guy? Wu Hao thought about what live streaming means. Wu Hao immediately understood and nodded at the screen. Watching the live broadcast at 6 o'clock is really idle. On the live broadcast, there was a scene of, ha ha ha, is this female celebrity so straightforward? I think it's a bit tiger. She truly deserves to be a female celebrity. She looks great when she wakes up without makeup. Who knows if you have prepared in advance? Does anyone have a link to that thing with curled hair? Kick me hard. That should be a stainless steel chopstick. The director's mouth twitched slightly. I can't say that, isn't it all fans who care about you? Wu didn't quite agree, my fans can't help but sleep. It's early morning, practice. After finishing speaking, he said to the screen, my fans should all go to bed. Otherwise, we can go out and run for 2 laps. Who knows what time you slept yesterday, get up now. Wu Hao still learned a lot of new knowledge from his phone, such as staying up late and slacking off. The barrage suddenly surged in interaction. My God, I don't think so yet. I fell asleep, be careful of sudden death. 555555, the betting is so good, I don't want to go out and run circles. This fairy sister actually cares about when I go to bed, beautiful woman posted it. I'll just go to bed at 5 o'clock and get up at 6 o'clock. How many seats will the king of hell leave for me? There are so many things to manage. Wu Good-looking didn't see what was said during the live broadcast, but Ma Jia was actually following the live broadcast and found that there were a few inexplicable black fans jumping around. The director took out a box and placed it in front of Wu Hao. Game rules, draw a note, you have to wake up the person who drew. Wu Hao reached in and casually took out a note, which read, Mingsha, Sister Ma is a bit speechless. What kind of luck is this? Wu Hao immediately drew a picture without believing in evil and realized that it was indeed his poor luck. The director's face immediately burst into laughter, and there was no need to worry about the effectiveness and gimmicks of his program. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Gou Dao. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Gou Dao. After everyone finished packing up, the director handed Wu Hao a task card. Wu looked at the task card, which was named Early Student. There was a thoughtful card attached to it, but the house number was not marked. The director cleared his throat and said, if you want to obtain the Yiming Shaman brand, you need to complete our next. Before the director could finish speaking, Wu Hao had already lifted his foot and walked out. The director was taken aback for a moment and followed behind her. Hey! 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 Don't go, don't you want any clues? Wu turned his head and smiled at the camera. Oh, it's really unfortunate. Yesterday, I saw everyone's house numbers, and Mingsha's is 807, right? The director was stunned, the camera was stunned, and the audience was stunned. The director chased after Wu Hao and said, how could it be? What you saw at that time, don't be fooling me. Wu Hao looked at Gou Dao with a shrewd expression on his face and said, Gou Dao is not afraid of the wind. His tongue flickered. Yesterday, when you were holding the list, I sat behind you. Wu Hao is used to observation and needs to take a second look at everything. Yesterday, the list specifically indicated the room numbers of a few people, so she had an extra eye to note them down. The director thought about it for a moment, but who would care about the content on the list? I can still remember it. He let out a deep sigh in his heart. Oh, he miscalculated. Ha ha ha, I just saw the director, he's speechless. Director. Do you still have this naughty operation? That smile was taken care of by me. She's so beautiful, I love her so much. I suggest everyone stay away from my wife. Don't you have your own wife? Ha, are you setting up a character again? Please don't be a demon, don't want to see Wu Hao. By the time everyone regained their senses, Wu Hao had almost walked to the elevator entrance. The elevator arrived, and Wu Hao stepped forward to stop it with his hand. He tilted his head and said, "Let's go." "What are you doing in a daze?" The director walked into the elevator with anger and laughter and said, "I don't have a sense of achievement without playing like this." Wu laughed brightly and said, "What's going on? Did you commit a foul?" The director suffered a loss from a young celebrity for the first time, and instead of getting angry, he was full of fighting spirit. "Of course not, I will always be extraordinary in the future. Pay attention to the rules." The audience is very familiar with the director's urination and exclaimed, it's over, Xia Yan has been listed as a key observation object. Director Dog. What's up with us? Let's fight. Let's fight. What's wrong? Why can't I understand? Someone is popularizing bullet screen science, this director is very good at causing trouble. Previously, there were celebrities and he was played around in a battle of wits and bravery. This director's surname is Gou, so he's called Dog Director. He often causes trouble. Last time, he made Baihua look disheveled, and even his fans had nothing to say. As the barrage discussed, the elevator reached the 5th floor and everyone followed Wu Hao to the entrance of Yimingxia. Wu Hao also drew the wake-up package, noise package, the 2 large iron plates handed over by director Wu. Good. Looking should be called symbols after some thought. Allow Wu Hao to silently mourn for Yimingxia. During the live broadcast, everyone looked at Wu Hao holding a symbol with a bewildered expression, and except for a few true fans, they all burst into laughter. Of course, there are also those who criticize the director, and being scolded by the director is already a daily operation. The director took the room card and assigned a photographer to go in and check the situation first. After the photographer went in and checked, there was no problem. He made an okay gesture and the crowd continued to come in. Wu Hao followed the director and walked in. When they reached the bedside, the group watched Wu Hao's next move. Wu Hao coughed twice before slamming the cymbals into a loud sound. Fortunately, with those 2 coughs, Yimingxia woke up for a while and almost jumped out of bed. The barrage got excited, ah. The sandbag that kept me awake. Shabao, hurry up. It quieted down for a moment inside and immediately became lively. Yimingxia's agent also heard the commotion and jumped up from next door, running over in pajamas. Wu looked at the manager with a chicken coop head and asked the director, "You didn't even notify the manager?" The director wore a warm smile on his face, but it brought the cold morning. Wu Hao immediately put the symbol in the director's hand and said to Yimingxia and his agent, "What he instructed has nothing to do with me." Yimingxia brushed her teeth and stared at Wu Hao from the mirror. Her eyes, which had not yet dissipated her anger from waking up, didn't look too fierce, but rather natural and stunned. Wu Hao shrugged and said, "Don't blame me, I was ambushed at 6 o'clock in the morning." Then Yimingxia stared at the director intently, but the director didn't care and walked away in a daze. Yimingxia sighed and began brushing his teeth. He wasn't really angry, but the first thing he heard when he woke up was Wu Hao's voice. He also remembered yesterday's words from his agent and couldn't quite distinguish what she was going to do. But he took advantage of the gap between washing his face and glanced at Wu Hao. She was facing the camera and communicating with the director, without even giving him a glance. He shook his head and felt like he was overthinking. His agent winked at him from the side, and he shook his head, causing the agent to relax. It was Yimingxia's turn to draw lots, and he picked up a piece of paper with the words, Baihua, written on it. Wu Hao leaned over to take a look, and when Yimingxia saw Wu Hao suddenly approaching, his body was about to explode with sweat. Wu Hao noticed Yimingxia's nervousness and took an inconspicuous step back, distancing the two. Wu Hao doesn't think this action is out of line. Fortunately, Wu Hao only glanced at the name on the paper without making any intimate movements. She pointed to it and said, "Ah, this person is here." Before he could finish speaking, Gou Dao quickly asked the female assistant beside him to cover Wu Hao's mouth. The female assistant walked forward in 3 steps and 2 steps, but before she could reach out, Wu Hao quickly leaned in and helped Yi Mingsha's shoulder jump to the other side. It's so fast that it's hard to see clearly, and even the live audience couldn't see it clearly. Everyone present didn't react, and Yi Mingsha only felt a slight weight on her shoulders. He didn't even have time to dodge, and almost in an instant, that force disappeared. Wu Hao said the second half of the sentence, 903, Gou Dao had a look of helplessness on his face, but Yi Mingsha had not yet realized it. What? What do you mean by that? Wu Hao patted his shoulder and said, "You'll need it. The fans of Bullet Screen Yi Mingsha are all worried about him, ah. Just go." Xiaobao has really become a silly treasure. Gou Dao handed Yi Mingsha the task card, and after reading it, Yi Mingsha instantly understood the grateful look he gave to Wu Hao. Wu Hao smiled to show his impoliteness, then swaggered over to Gou Dao and said, "It's not a foul, is it?" Gou Dao laughed angrily and said, "This time doesn't count, next time it counts." The director stood behind the camera with a smile, watching Wu Hao. Wu Hao felt a chill and shuddered. "Director, if you have anything to say, don't look at me like that, I'm afraid." The director waved his hand and said, "How could Xiaowu say that? What can I do? It's just." Wu Hao raised his hand with a cold expression and said, "If there's nothing else, just don't say it. I don't really want to hear what's going on." A barrage of bullets, It's said that Gou Dao has hit a hard bone this time. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Baihua. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Baihua. The director surprisingly showed a pitiful expression, and Wu Hao couldn't bear to look straight at him. Yi Mingsha walked out from behind Wu Hao and quickly covered her eyes when she saw the director's expression, saying, "I haven't eaten yet this morning. Don't ruin my appetite all day." The photographer also cooperated well and gave the director a close-up shot. The barrage was filled with mournful cries, "It's good to stain their eyes early in the morning. What crime did our audience commit? Step back. Step back. Step back. The believer wishes to be a vegetarian for the next hour, causing damage to rebound." The director quickly sorted out his expression and said somewhat reluctantly, "Is it really that bad? Cut, I'm not willing to do it yet. Wait for Yi Mingsha to prepare," and walked the group towards Baihua's room. Wu Hao was about to return to his room when he was grabbed by both the director and Yi Mingsha. Wu looked at the big hands on 2 different wrists and said, "Do I also want to follow the next one?" Yi Mingsha was somewhat reluctant but did not let go. He quietly took Wu Hao out of the live broadcast camera and said, "Baihua, how can I say it? Old Sei criticized me." Upon hearing this, Wu Hao looked at Yi Mingsha incredulously and shook off his hand, saying, "Absolutely absurd." The director kept an eye on the movements of these 2 people and followed suit. "Why aren't you leaving?" Yi Mingsha immediately pushed aside the director and tightly held on to Wu Hao, saying, "We are discussing countermeasures. Don't come over yet." Yi Mingsha quickly explained, "It's not what you think." "Oh my. How do you say it? You just need to pretend to be a little sweeter then, you understand." Wu Hao looked at him with a wary expression and said, "I don't understand." Yi Mingsha stomped her feet anxiously and said, "How could you not move, just act coquettishly. Pretend to be pitiful." Whispering. Wu Hao still felt that this person had ulterior motives, and his refusal was immediately blocked by Yi Mingsha. He immediately changed the atmosphere, his eyes becoming wet for some reason, and then he gently hooked his fingers around Wu Hao's sleeve and said to Wu Hao with a twisted expression, "Don't reject me so passionately." Wu Hao couldn't digest the scene in front of her, so she stood there motionless for half a minute. Yi Mingsha blushed with embarrassment and her tone became anxious. concealing the previous atmosphere. That's it, do you understand? Wu Hao was greatly frightened by this scene, as she watched as Mingxia had returned to normal. Wu Hao swallowed his saliva and asked, "What is the reason for you to pay such a price?" Mingxia thought she was teasing him while listening to her gentle demeanor. He casually tidied up his clothes and said, "Baihua is a bit violent towards men, but he feels gentle towards delicate little girls." Wu Hao asked, "Violence? How violent is it?" Mingxia looked at her strangely and said, "Don't you remember? Last time he caused another pair of male artists to have a concussion in a game." Wu Hao thought for a moment, as if she had this memory. She could only pat her head and said, "Maybe I've been a bit tired lately, I just remembered." Wu Hao generously agreed to Mingxia's request. The group of people marched grandly to Baihua's room. As with the previous steps, Wu Hao and Mingxia entered the second wave. Baihua was lying on the bed, shouting while Mingxia devoutly handed Wu Hao a water gun. Wu Hao showed contempt towards Mingxia's behavior with his eyes. Mingxia stood far away with a smile on her face. Anyway, she didn't want to be embarrassed anymore, so why bother? Wu Hao had no choice but to stand 2 meters away from the bed and fiercely use a water gun to poke at the target on the bed. Baihua was awakened by this abnormal way, and with sleepy eyes, he found his target and then took a dive and threw it. Wu Hao understood why Mingxia was afraid. The person rushing over is covered in tendons and flesh, and the diving speed is also very fast, with a very quick reaction. Wu Hao xiang, if this person had followed her in the past, he probably could have become a good official. Mingxia exclaimed anxiously, "You act coquettishly. You're good at martial arts. You can hide." He really took action. At this point, Wu Hao had long forgotten Mingxia's foolish move and his body followed the conditioned counterattack of consciousness. She quickly dodged Baihua and pinned her foot in front of him, then fired a water gun at him up close in the face. Baihua paused for a moment, not only angry but also shocked, but also more sober. At this moment, both the people in front of and behind the camera were hanging in their throats. The director quickly stepped forward to pull apart Baihua, but Wu Hao's small body couldn't withstand the turmoil. I saw Wu Hao's slender calves bend Baihua's knee inch by inch, and then took advantage of him not paying attention. Wu Hao fiercely pushed his head. The scene of Zhongwu getting injured did not appear, and Baihua lay on the bed with his upper body, only then did he fully wake up. He looked at Wu Hao, and no one knew his next move. After all, Baihua's violent tendencies were well known in the entertainment industry. I saw Baihua covering his face with a corner and saying, "Oh my goodness. I actually hit a woman. It's over." Then he sat up and glanced at Wu Hao, then wailed, "I haven't fought yet. It's over." Everyone was somewhat surprised by the scene. Mingxia gave Wu Hao a thumbs up with excitement and said, "Ha ha ha, you did a good job. Little Bai has never suffered this loss with such a big face. Wu Hao, where did you take this class? Push me on your private teaching method. I have a chance to turn over." Baihua threw away the blanket and punched Ming's salad on the bed. The director may have felt too violent and silently turned the camera away, giving the close up to Wu Hao who was watching this exciting scene. Perhaps Wu Hao's performance just now was very impressive, coupled with the vivid expressions on camera. Not many people were dissatisfied with turning the camera. Wu Hao's expression changed from confusion to surprise and then to empathetic pain, with a hint of disgust. Accompanied by the wailing of the voiceover, the barrage was harmonious. "I hope the Mingxia people are still here. Ha ha ha, every time Mingxia tries to be cheap. Wu Hao was so handsome just now. Sister, I can do it. Wife stickers. The previous poster is very injured now. He's like a skilled practitioner. How could it be?" Seeing that she doesn't have any muscles all over her, she probably responds quickly. "No way, no way. Some people really believe it, tsk 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 tsk. I guess the director can't bear to watch anymore. Hurry up and have Wu Hao and his team take Yi Mingsha away. Baihua relied heavily on his strength and did not let go, and many people did not pull the two apart. Wu Hao stepped forward and grabbed the numb muscle on Baihua's arm, which he was exerting so much force on. Baihua's hand suddenly lost its strength. Yi Mingsha quickly escaped from Baihua's clutches, and everyone only felt that Baihua might give the girl face. Only Baihua quietly rubbed his numb arm, staring at Wu Hao with scrutinizing eyes. She doesn't seem to think much about it anymore, maybe she let herself go due to a broken character. After thinking for a while, Baihua could only use this reason to explain everything. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Betting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Betting. Wu Hao walked out of the room with Yi Mingsha, who bared his teeth and shouted, "Oh, oh." Wu Hao gave him a funny look and said, "Stop howling, it doesn't hurt much at all." They all pick out areas with more meat to hit. Yi Ming's eyes didn't feel embarrassed as he saw the fake image being punctured. He took the opportunity to cover his chest with his hand and said, "You don't understand, what I hurt is my heart." Wu Hao said, "You and Baihua have a really good relationship." Yi Mingsha stood straight and said, "That's not it. He and I are iron brothers who grew up together." It was only after saying this that Wu Hao remembered that the two of them debuted together, and they had already mentioned this level of identity when they debuted. Wu Hao thought to himself, why is this memory still intermittent? The group arrived at the breakfast shop downstairs. The water vapor and lighting of the breakfast shop downstairs warmed the cold of the morning in the early morning. Wu Hao, Yi Mingsha, and some staff members are all selecting today's first meal from the menu. Wu Hao ordered some good things and sat on the outside stool, holding his chin in a daze. Yi Mingsha walked over and sat next to her curiously, asking, "What are you looking at?" Wu Hao lifted his chin and said, "Look at people, look at the sky, look at the earth." Yi Mingsha pursed her lips and said, "Tisk, nonsense literature." At this moment, the landlady walked over with a basket of steamed buns and placed them in front of Wu Hao, saying, "What the little girl and young man are talking about. Eat the steamed buns quickly, otherwise it will be cold in a while." Wu smiled and nodded, thanking the boss and starting to eat. The landlady asked expectantly, "How does it taste?" Wu Hao and Yi Mingsha reached out their thumbs at the same time, praising the buns in their mouths before even swallowing them. "They're very delicious. The buns have thin skin and big filling, and the boss looks honest." The landlady happily urged the boss, "Hurry up and serve the others. We can't let everyone go hungry." The boss also walked out with nimble hands and feet, carrying things. The boss's wife happily shared with the boss in the kitchen, "Did you just hear that? Even the big stars praised our steamed buns for being delicious." The boss was busy making steamed stuffed buns, and he still promised to nod. "Yes, yes. The steamed stuffed buns made by children his mother are the best in the country." The landlady saw the big star looking towards them when she heard the commotion, so she quickly felt embarrassed and lowered her head to poke the boss fiercely. "Go ahead, don't you know how to keep it down? You know you're embarrassing me." Wu Hao looked at the happy faces of the couple and the pedestrians hurriedly passing by on the street, feeling homesick for the safety of the country. After a while, Baihua and the director also walked down and joined the breakfast team. Baihua stared at Wu for a long time, and Wu Hao felt relieved when he remembered that he had not had much contact with him in his original body. The director didn't hesitate to eat it at all. Yi Mingsha asked the director, "How many others are there?" The director waved his hand and said, "Some say they won't eat, after all." Before finishing his sentence, the director turned his gaze to Wu Hao and asked, "Are you sure you still want to eat?" Wu Hao stuffed another steamed bun into his mouth and said, "Eat it, I'm so hungry if I don't eat it." Baihua took a sip of soybean milk and said, "Aren't you afraid to spit Yi Mingsha again?" Wu Hao and Yi Mingsha both remembered what had happened that day, and Yi Mingsha quietly moved back. Wu Hao still didn't stop eating and said, I shouldn't be able to, after all, I have made a lot of progress. All three cast incredulous gazes. Wu Hao suddenly tilted his head and smiled, how about gambling? If her confidants were here, they would understand that Wu Hao's fancy thoughts were once again aroused. During the days of war and military training, everyone had no leisure activities, so it was normal for everyone to occasionally make a bet and participate in a ring competition within the team. Wu Hao usually wins out of 10, but she is not very addicted to gambling and only knows how to gamble on interesting things. The director and the three of them all became interested, and Yi Mingsha asked, "How do we gamble?" Wu Hao thought for a moment and said, "Then bet on a late-night snack." Yi Mingsha slapped his thigh and said, "I will increase my weight. Add a high-grade seafood hot pot for supper. I bet you will vomit." The director smiled and said, "Hee, I'm with Xiaoyi." Baihua pondered for a moment and said, "I bet I'm good at martial arts and won't vomit." Yi Mingsha looked at Baihua in surprise and said, "Little Bai Lian, you don't need to be so obvious if you want to treat me to dinner." Baihua shrugged his shoulders and said, "Young master, I'm all twisted. Hey, I'm walking against you." Wu Hao raised his eyebrows towards Yi Mingsha, looking very mischievous and said, "Why don't you set your position first and don't play tricks then?" Baihua looked at Wu Hao, whose mischievous aura was inadvertently revealed, and felt that this person was not as simple as what the outside world had said. As they were talking about the bet, the other two celebrities who participated in the program also went to the breakfast shop. The ones who came were Duan Daojio and Lu Qianqian. Wu Hao was thinking about his memories of the other four celebrities. The male celebrity's name is Duan Daojio, who is in his 30s and comes from an actor background. He has a relatively masculine appearance and often plays roles such as police officers. In the show, his relationship with Wu Hao is average. Female celebrity Lu Qianqian comes from a talent show, with a sweet appearance in a young age, but a very good personality. Therefore, she is also a popular presence among these 7 people and has more contact with Wu Hao. The female celebrity comes from a gentle actor background, with a slightly delicate appearance and introverted personality at the age of 24. She has the least contact with Wu Hao among the 6. There is also male celebrity Lu Qi, who is famous for participating in singing competitions. There have been some bad rumors before, and the company saw that he was brave enough to arrange for him to participate in this variety show, hoping to whitewash him. Duan Daojio came over and asked for a soybean milk deep fried dough sticks. "Good morning. What did you say so early? So happy. We made a bet that Wu Hao will vomit again today," Yi Mingsha said with a particularly hearty smile. Lu Qianqian and Duan Daojio thought to themselves, "Why is Yi Mingsha so tiger?" They glanced at Wu Hao again and didn't seem to be angry. Duan Daojio finally sat aside with peace of mind to have breakfast and said, "Don't bully anyone." Lu Qianqian also sat beside Wu Hao and said, "That's right, Wu Hao, don't listen to his nonsense." Wu Hao ordered another basket of baozi and handed it to Lu Qianqian, saying, "No, I said I wanted to make a bet. Do you want to eat it?" Lu Qianqian shook her head and said, "Forget it, I'm afraid of vomiting." Lu Qianqian looked at the cage in front of her anxiously and said, "Why don't you stop eating? If you can't spit it out, you'll win." Yi Mingsha pointed at Lu Qianqian and said, "Don't give me any bad ideas over there." Duan Daojio asked, "How many people are participating in the gambling game now?" The director pointed at the 4 people and said, "We are 4. Baihua and Wu are fond of gambling, but we are both fond of gambling. The bet is a barbecue and seafood hot pot." Lu Qianqian immediately defended Wu Hao and said, "Then I'll bet too. I'll increase the bet. Low-fat desserts are enough. I'll be with Wu Hao." Duan Daojio found it quite interesting and added, "Then I'll talk to the director and them. After all, the director said they can vomit, so today's content is probably very rich." After a while, the other 2 also arrived at the breakfast shop entrance, and their temperament and appearance attracted many pedestrians on the roadside. The camera showed the camera to Mingsha and his group. Why is there still a warrior sitting in the middle? Mingsha and Baihua often make mistakes. Everyone understands that fans know that Mingsha is usually okay, but anyone who touches Baihua becomes foolish. But now how could Wu Hao appear exceptionally harmonious between the two? Wu Hao received a text message from Sister Ma reminding him that he is still live streaming and to pay attention to his appearance when eating. Wu Hao replied clearly, but the 3 drawers that blocked her face in front of her had no room for maneuver. The barrage is asking which breakfast shop this is. I'm so hungry. I hope Wu is a bit overweight. The live broadcast only found out that compared to passers-by, the celebrity is indeed terrifyingly thin. Wu Hao. Give it to Mom. Mom, it looks so delicious. I want to eat it too. Do you look like it? Don't induce vomiting or anything else later. Hee, have you come back to being a character again? End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Program. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Program. Wu Hao and others finished breakfast and returned to the team. Wu Hao, are you okay? He smiled kindly at her. Wu waved his hand nonchalantly and said, it's okay, just adapt. Lu Qi glanced at them and chuckled in a low voice, then walked straight between them. He gave him a gentle and somewhat aggrieved look, but immediately withdrew his gaze. He smiled gently at her and returned to his position. Wu Hao did not give the 2 of them too much attention. The director assigned the task and a dedicated camera followed up. Although Wu Hao may be a bit awkward, he is gradually becoming familiar with him. The cameraman thought she was influenced by the last incident and comforted, it's okay, don't worry. Today, you can do whatever you want and I will definitely take a beautiful picture of you. Wu Hao nodded and dared not speak much. Before the start of the program, Wen seemed to have some questions to ask Mingsha, but Wu Hao was so scared when he saw Mingsha approaching that he almost jumped away. Fortunately, he restrained himself and did not make the scene too embarrassing. Gently aware of Mingsha's resistance, she pitifully took 2 steps back. Mingsha awkwardly scratched her head and looked at Gou Dao. Gou Dao looked up at the sky and adopted a ignoring tactic, saying to the assistant next to him, look at today's sky, it's really nice. You don't have to worry about everything in a while. The assistant listened in confusion and thought to himself, we're going indoors, what kind of natural light do we need? But I still followed suit. Mingsha looked at Baihua, but unfortunately, her good brother couldn't see her pleading eyes. He could only look at Wu Hao, hoping that she could understand the pleading in his eyes. Before Mingsofa could even make an eye attack, Wu Hao strode forward to the 2 of them and said, what's wrong? Mingsha breathed a big sigh of relief and said, it's gentle to say that you want to form a team for a while, after all, the first time you vomited like that. Gentle and somewhat embarrassed, I'm also a bit scared. Is that something to say? Mingsha felt indifferent and said, sure, we all can. Wu Hao turned his head and smiled as he faced Mingsha. Mingsha wisely closed his mouth and said, we're all okay, great, just form a team. Wu Hao smiled and nodded, sure, I think it's pretty good. After speaking, he stood between the 2 very consciously. Thank you gently. Wu Hao and Mingsha bared their teeth and stared at the bright sun, saying, you're welcome. The sunlight backlight hit both of them, causing a slight tremble. Director Gou saw this scene and said to the photographer, I'll keep an eye on these 3 people and not miss a single shot. The assistant also understood, don't worry, not a single hot topic can be missed. The 2 of them showed mischievous smiles. Wu Hao immediately felt the malice from the director, and she glanced at the 2 who were rubbing their genitals and ignored them. The director took a group of people to a medical school, and Wu glanced at it. It was very good and familiar, which was the place where Xia Yan vomited last time. The director walked out with a smile, followed by a male doctor wearing a white coat. The male doctor looked a bit cramped, and the director introduced to everyone, this is Yan Ming, a forensic doctor from Xi Provincial Medical University. He has been working in forensic medicine for 15 years, and everyone's task today is related to him. All the artists applauded and welcomed, while the doctor introduced himself somewhat awkwardly, but when it came to his profession, he became serious. People around cannot help but respect this profession. Yan Ming led everyone to a well-tidied-up studio, where there was a large table with piles of materials on top. Everyone naturally sat over and stood at the front, introducing seriously, "These are some approved materials for your reference, but I don't quite agree with everyone's casual participation in this profession. Without a sense of awe, it would be a great disrespect to us, our work subjects, and society." This sentence completely put an end to the casual thinking of a few people, as they carefully arranged the information they had just flipped through. Speaking of the strictness of one's profession, one no longer feels cramped, but has a confident radiance and the power of faith. Yan Ming picked up the materials and introduced them to everyone after seeing that everyone was in awe. "I'm glad that everyone can truly understand and participate in our work." Yan Ming opened the document and said, "Forensic doctors not only have access to corpses, but also offer judicial appraisal and testimony in court. Many people in society have some taboos about the profession of forensic medicine, but I would like to say that I am honored to work in this profession." Yi Mingsha raised her hand and said, "Dr. Yan, how did you decide to study forensic medicine back then?" Yan Ming looked at the nameplate on the table and said, "Is Yi Mingsha really? My father is a criminal police officer and my mother is a forensic doctor, so it may be due to the influence of the family environment." Gently raising his hand, he said, "What is the reason that made you steadfastly embark on this path?" Yan Ming and Wu Hao both blurted out, "For the rights of the living, for the words of the dead." Yan Ming looked at Wu Hao with some surprise, and Wu Hao smiled and nodded at him. Wu Hao recalled that this sentence was spoken by an old grave worker who accompanied him in the army back then. The work of burying graves in their place is done by lower-class talents, and there is not much money left to be looked down upon by various people. Not to mention those who follow the army, they have more work and less money. But the old grave worker did not complain, he would carefully wipe and sew the body every time he inspected it. At that time, Wu Hao only felt that this person was patient and responsible. Until one time her confidant was poisoned to death by a cup of poisoned wine from the emperor, the old grave worker did the same. Yes, at that time she understood the emperor's distrust of the Wu family. She insisted on completing it together with the old grave worker. She watched the old grave worker carefully cut open the skin on the person's body, record every small point and doubt, and then sew it up carefully. She has seen too much on the battlefield, but this time it's different. She feels the respect and awe of a living person towards an unrelated dead person. She was completely drunk at night alone, and the old grave worker sat by her side drinking with her all night. She only remembers getting drunk and pulling the old grave to ask why. The old grave worker took a sip of wine and frowned with a spicy expression, leaving a sentence. "There's not so much. Why? I speak for the living and for the dead, old man." She cried all night while holding the old grave. From then on, she often went to drink with the old grave. On the 1st and 15th days of each month, the old grave worker would leave a long life lock on the table and drink a drunken and lonely life. Finally, it was discovered that the son of the old tomb worker was a doctor accompanying the army and was captured by the enemy and tortured to death. She couldn't remember what the last time she saw an old grave was like, she only remembered not seeing an old grave on the 15th day. She couldn't find him in every corner, and she rushed to the unclean battlefield for a night before finding the old grave worker who was holding the enemy's breath. That day, she buried the long life lock and dissecting tools made by the old tomb on the mountain facing the battlefield. That day, she lurked into the enemy camp with a team of people and wiped the neck of the enemy general. Everyone fell silent for a while, only Wu Hao kept flipping through the information in his hand. Baihua and Yan Ming were very sensitive to the sense of solemnity and solitude in Wu Hao's body, and he was somewhat surprised. This should not be what a celebrity should have. I quickly recovered and hid my emotions. Baihua no longer felt the same way as before, while Yan Ming felt that he had misread. How could it be even more terrifying than the feeling of Captain Criminal Investigation? Everyone looked at the photos on the materials and felt somewhat uncomfortable. Gentle and gentle, Lu Qianshan ran out with her mouth covered. Wu Hao just looked up slightly at Yi Mingsha and said, "See you, I did the same last time. It wasn't intentional." Yi Mingsha suppressed the feeling of nausea and said, "I understand, I can't even bear it." Yi Mingsha looked at Wu Hao with a calm expression and said, "Are you okay? I feel like you're not as responsive as last time." Wu Hao continued flipping through the photo and said, "Really? Maybe I'll get used to vomiting twice." Upon hearing this, Yan Ming was somewhat surprised and joined the discussion with the two of them, saying, "How could it be possible to get used to vomiting twice in this profession? I suffered a lot when I first started this profession." Yi Mingsha became interested and said, "Professor Yan Ming, let's talk about it. Are there any particularly impressive cases?" Wu Hao also looked at Professor Yan Ming. Professor Yan Ming's eyes collided with Wu Hao's, and he hesitated for a moment before slowly speaking, "That winter at N-City Normal University." Wu Hao was not interested in this case, as he had seen it during online searches. It involved juvenile delinquency, rape, murder, dismemberment, and antisocial personality. What interests her is that Professor Yan Ming hesitated noticeably as he watched her just now. Professor Yan Ming hesitated for a moment, but what unspeakable case flashed through his mind? End of this chapter.